The Great Hall of Nexus Prime was the largest structure ever built by intelligent life. Its ceiling stretched so high that clouds formed inside it. Thousands of alien species gathered here every cycle to discuss the matters of the galaxy. This was the heart of the Galactic Concord, the alliance that had ruled the stars for 10,000 years. Ambassador Elara Vance stood in the human section. It was small. It was in the back. It was exactly where the galaxy thought humans belonged. She was a tall woman with gray streaks in her dark hair. Her eyes were tired but sharp. She had served as humanity's voice in this hall for 15 years. In all that time, she had learned one simple truth. Nobody here cared about humans. The Galactic Concord was ruled by 3 elder races. They had traveled the stars when humans were still living in caves. They looked at humanity the way a giant looks at an ant. The Velithari were the warriors. They were tall reptiles with scales like armor and eyes like burning coal. They had conquered more worlds than any other species. Their fleets darkened the skies of 100 systems. When they spoke, others listened. When they demanded, others obeyed. The Synth Collective was different. They were not one mind but millions of minds connected together. They looked like floating silver spheres, each one containing a brain that was linked to all the others. They controlled trade. They controlled money. They controlled the flow of goods across the galaxy. To anger the Synth was to watch your economy die. The Orivan Mandate was the third power. They were thin, pale creatures with 4 arms and faces that never showed emotion. They believed in rules, laws, and order above all things. They served as judges and enforcers for the Concord. Their word was law. Humans had joined this Concord 200 years ago. They had been so excited then, so hopeful. They had looked up at the stars and seen friends waiting to be made. They had been wrong. In 2 centuries, humanity had learned its place. They were workers. They were colonizers of bad worlds that nobody else wanted. They were clever with their hands and tough enough to survive on planets that would kill other species. The elder races found this useful, but useful was not the same as respected. Humans controlled only 12 star systems. They had no seat on the High Council. When they spoke in this great hall, others talked over them. When they asked for help, others looked away. Elara had accepted this. She had told herself that patience was wisdom, that one day, things would change, that humanity just needed to prove itself. Then her communication device buzzed. She looked down at the message. She read it once. She read it twice. Her hands began to shake. New Helsinki was gone. New Helsinki was a human colony on the edge of human space. It was a young world, full of families who had come to build new lives. 2.3 million people lived there. Farmers, teachers, children, old people who had retired to watch alien sunsets. They had built cities and planted gardens. They had named their streets after places on Earth they would never see again. A Velithari war fleet had arrived in orbit 6 hours ago. They had given no warning. They had made no demands. They had simply opened fire. The cities were glass now. The gardens were ash. The people were nothing. Elara walked forward. Her legs felt like they belonged to someone else. She walked past the delegations of 100 species. She walked until she stood before the High Council itself. High Arbiter Kethvoran of the Arivion looked down at her. His forearms were folded. His pale face showed nothing. "The human ambassador approaches without permission," he said. His voice was flat and cold. "This is not proper procedure. You murdered 2 million of my people," Elara said. Her voice cracked. "Explain." The Velithari delegate, Lord Commander Vask, rose from his seat. He was enormous. His scales were dark green, and old scars crossed his face. He had personally led the fleet that burned New Helsinki. "There is nothing to explain," Vask said. He sounded bored. "Your colony was built in violation of Velithari territorial claims. We removed it. That claim was filed after our colony was established," Elara said. "We have the records. We have the dates. New Helsinki was there first. The Concord has reviewed the matter." High Arbiter Kethvoran interrupted. "The Velithari claim has been recognized. The human colony was in violation. You changed the records." Elara's voice was rising now. "You rewrote history to justify murder. Careful, human. This came from the Synth delegation." A silver sphere floated forward, and 1,000 voices spoke as one. "You are making accusations you cannot prove. This is bad for business. This is bad for your people." Elara looked around the great hall. Thousands of aliens watched her. Some looked uncomfortable. Most looked bored. A few were laughing quietly among themselves. She saw no sympathy. She saw no justice. She saw only the truth she had spent her career trying to ignore. Humanity was alone. "What compensation will be offered?" she asked. Her voice was quiet now. "For 2 million lives?" High Arbiter Keth Voran consulted a document. "The Concord offers 400,000 galactic credits. Additionally, all human settlements within 3 parsecs of Velithari territory must be relocated within 1 standard year. 400,000 credits. That was less than the cost of a single cargo ship. That was the price the galaxy placed on 2 million human souls. And, on top of this insult, humanity was being told to abandon more of its worlds." Elara thought of her niece. She had lived on New Helsinki. She had been 7 years old. She had wanted to be a pilot when she grew up. She had sent Elara a drawing last month. It showed a human ship flying through a field of stars. That drawing was the only thing left of her now. "Is this the justice of the Galactic Concord?" Elara asked. She looked at each member of the High Council in turn. "Is this what 10,000 years of civilization has built? A system where the powerful can murder the weak and call it law?" "The matter is settled," Keth Voran said. "Humanity will accept these terms. There is no alternative. There is always an alternative. And what would that be, human?" Lord Commander Vask leaned forward. His teeth were sharp and yellow. He was smiling. "Will you fight us? Your species has 200 ships. We have 12,000. You have 12 worlds. We have 300. You have been part of this galaxy for 2 centuries. We have ruled it for 5,000 years. He laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. "You are nothing. You have always been nothing. You will always be nothing. Accept your place." The hall was silent. Every eye was on Elara Vance. She was one woman standing alone against the rulers of the galaxy. She was small. She was powerless. She was human. She should have been afraid. But as she stood there, something changed in her eyes. The fear faded. The grief faded. Something older took its place. Something that had been sleeping in human hearts since the first of them had picked up a stone and refused to be prey. "You will regret this," she said. Lord Commander Vask laughed again. Others joined him. The sound filled the great hall. It bounced off the walls and echoed through the clouds that formed near the ceiling. Ambassador Elara Vance turned and walked away. She did not look back. Behind her, the laughter continued. It would not last. Far away, on a small blue world called Earth, people were watching. They saw the laughter. They heard the insults. They learned that 2 million of their brothers and sisters were dead, and the galaxy had decided they were worth less than a cargo ship. Something woke up that day. Something old. Something patient. Something that had been waiting for 200 years. The galaxy had made a mistake, and soon, very soon, it would understand just how terrible that mistake had been. The United Terran Assembly met in Geneva, in the same building where humans had once tried to prevent wars among themselves. That was a long time ago, before the stars, before the conquered, before humanity learned that the universe was full of creatures who saw them as insects. Secretary General Marcus Chen stood at the podium. He was an old man with white hair and a face like carved stone. He had served humanity for 40 years. He had believed in peace. He had believed in patience. He had believed that if humans just worked hard enough, the galaxy would accept them. He did not believe that anymore. The chamber was packed. Every representative of every human world was present. They had come from 12 star systems. They had come from mining colonies and farming worlds and research stations. They had come because 2 million of their people were dead. Chen pressed a button. The screens behind him came to life. They showed New Helsinki. The footage was taken by a rescue ship that had arrived too late. It showed cities turned to black glass. It showed craters where schools had stood. It showed the burned shells of escape ships that had been shot down as they tried to flee. It showed a child's toy floating in the debris field above the planet. A small stuffed bear, spinning slowly in the silence of space. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Some wept quietly. Others sat in frozen silence. The footage played for 5 minutes. Then the screens went dark. 2.3 million, Chen said. His voice was steady. That is how many we lost. Mothers, fathers, children. Old ones who had worked their whole lives to see a new world. Young ones who had not yet seen anything at all. He paused. We asked for justice. The Concorde offered us 400,000 credits. That is less than 1 credit for every 10 people killed. That is the value the galaxy places on human life. A murmur ran through the chamber. It was not a sound of grief. It was something darker. For 200 years, we have followed the rules, Chen continued. We have bowed. We have accepted insults. We have watched our colonies stripped of resources by Synth traders. We have watched our ships searched by Oravan enforcers. We have watched the Velithari take whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted, and we said nothing, because we believed that peace was worth any price. He looked out at the assembly. His eyes were hard. We were wrong. The murmur grew louder. They see us as weak. They see us as prey. They believe that we will bow forever, that we will take any abuse, that we will accept any insult, because that is what weak species do. That is what prey does. Chen leaned forward. They have forgotten what we are. He pressed another button. New footage appeared on the screens. It was not from New Helsinki. It was from Earth. From a time before humans ever left their world. The screens showed war. They showed trenches filled with mud and blood and screaming men. They showed cities burning under nuclear fire. They showed soldiers charging into machine gun fire because their officers told them to. They showed civilians starving in sieges that lasted years. They showed gas attacks and firebombing and things so terrible that humans had buried them in their history books and tried to forget. This is what we are, Chen said. This is what we have always been. We are not a peaceful species. We are a species that chose peace. We are not weak. We are a species that chose to be gentle. For 200 years, we chose to hide what we are. We chose to be good neighbors. We chose to believe that the galaxy would reward kindness with kindness. The footage ended. The galaxy taught us otherwise. Secretary General Chen straightened. When he spoke again, his voice filled the chamber like thunder. I call for a vote. The question is simple. War or submission. We can accept the Concorde's terms. We can bow. We can relocate our people and take their credits and hope that next time they choose to murder us, they will be more gentle. His fists clenched. Or we can remind the galaxy what humanity really is. The vote was unanimous. Every hand rose. Every voice called out the same word. A word that humans had used for thousands of years. A word that meant suffering and death and terrible destruction. War. The news reached Nexus Prime within hours. Lord Commander Vask was dining with other Velithari officers when his aide brought him the message. He read it and laughed so hard that wine came out of his nose. The humans have declared war, he announced. On us. On the Velithari Dominion. His officers laughed with him. One of them nearly choked on his food. How many ships do they have? Someone asked. 200? 300? Our scouts say no more than 200 combat-capable vessels, the aide confirmed. Their largest ship is smaller than our smallest battlecruiser. This will not be a war, Vask said. He wiped his mouth and stood. This will be a cleaning. We will burn their worlds one by one. We will make New Helsinki look like a gentle warning. And when we are done, humans will be a memory. A funny story we tell our children. The tiny species that thought it could fight the Velithari. He gave orders. A fleet would be assembled. 20 ships would be enough. Maybe 30. To be safe, they would strike Earth itself. Cut off the head, and the body would die. On Earth, Secretary General Chen received word that the Velithari were mobilizing. His aides were afraid. The numbers were impossible. Even 30 Velithari ships could destroy everything humanity had. Chen smiled. It was not a kind smile. Send the signal, he said. Wake them up. Across human space, things began to happen. In the asteroid belt of the Sol system, rocks that had been silent for decades suddenly came to life. Massive doors opened in their surfaces. Ships emerged. Not the small, simple vessels the Concorde had seen. These were warships. Real warships. Ships with guns that could crack moons and armor that could survive a star's corona. In hidden bases on frozen moons and abandoned planets. Similar scenes played out. Shipyards that had never appeared on any Concorde survey powered up their systems. Factories that had been officially listed as agricultural processing began producing weapons. The message spread through secret channels that the Concorde had never found. To retired soldiers who had been waiting for this call. To engineers who had spent their careers designing weapons they hoped would never be used. To pilots who had trained in simulators hidden in basements and caves. humanity had been preparing for 100 years. It had started after the Synth Collective deliberately crashed the economy of 3 human worlds. The Conquered had called it a market correction. 12 million humans had starved, and humanity had learned that the galaxy would never protect them. So they protected themselves. They built ships in secret. They trained soldiers in secret. They developed weapons in secret. They did it slowly, carefully, patiently. They smiled at conquered inspectors and showed them only what they wanted to be seen. They played the role of the weak, harmless species. And they waited. Now the waiting was over. Lord Commander Vask received an updated intelligence report 3 days after his joke about cleaning. His face went pale. His hands shook. "This cannot be right," he whispered. "We have confirmed it with multiple sources," his aide said. "The humans have revealed their true fleet. Over 4,000 combat vessels. Many of them match or exceed our own ships in firepower. 4,000 ships, not 200. 4,000. Vask thought about the message he had received from Ambassador Vance before she left Nexus Prime. 3 words that he had ignored. "You will regret this." He was beginning to understand. The human declaration of war was broadcast across every communication channel in the galaxy. Secretary General Chen delivered it himself. His words were simple. To all species of the Galactic Concord. For 200 years, humanity asked only to live in peace. We were answered with contempt. We were answered with theft. We were answered with murder. 2 million of our people lie dead on New Helsinki. The Concord calls this justice. We call it war. He paused. Behind him, the stars of human space glittered like cold fire. We are not coming to negotiate. We are not coming to ask for mercy. We are coming to teach you something your ancestors forgot. Humanity is not prey. Humanity is not weak. Humanity is not kind to those who hurt our children. His eyes were ice. We are coming for you. All of you. And when we are done, the galaxy will remember why it should have left us in peace. The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy, 1 billion aliens watched it in silence. They looked at the human ships emerging from their hiding places. They looked at the faces of human soldiers preparing for war. They saw something in those faces that they had never seen before. They saw what humans looked like when they stopped pretending to be civilized. And for the first time in 10,000 years, the masters of the galaxy felt something they had almost forgotten: fear. Admiral Corax was the greatest military commander the Velithari had produced in 3 centuries. He had won 47 battles. He had conquered 11 species. He had never known defeat. When the High Command chose him to lead the war against humanity, he felt insulted. "This is beneath me," he told his officers. "Crushing insects is work for cadets, not admirals." His fleet gathered at the Korath Nebula, a swirling mass of gas and dust on the border of human space. 300 Velithari warships, the greatest concentration of military power since the Arivan pacification wars. It was overkill, and everyone knew it. The humans sent 200 ships to meet them. Corax studied the enemy formation from his command throne. The human vessels were smaller than his. Their weapons were less powerful. Their shields were weaker. By every measure that mattered, his fleet should destroy them in minutes. "Open a channel," he ordered. "I will offer them one chance to surrender. When they refuse, we will show the galaxy what happens to those who challenge the Velithari." The channel opened. A human face appeared on the screen. It was a woman with short black hair and eyes that showed nothing. Her uniform was simple. Her voice was calm. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Third Fleet," she said. "You have entered human space. Leave now, and you will be allowed to live." Corax laughed. His officers laughed with him. The idea that 200 small ships could threaten 300 Velithari warships was absurd. "Human," Corax said. "You are outnumbered. You are outgunned. Your species has never fought an interstellar war. We have won 200 of them. I will give you 1 minute to power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. If you do not, I will destroy every ship in your fleet, and then burn your homeworld to ash." Admiral Chen did not blink. She did not look afraid. She looked at Corax the way a hunter looks at something it is about to kill. 60 seconds is a long time," she said. "Let me show you what we can do in 60 seconds. The channel closed. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries. It would be called the Korath Massacre. It would change everything. The human ships attacked. They did not form battle lines. They did not follow any tactical doctrine the Velethari had ever seen. They scattered like seeds in the wind and then came together like a fist. Small groups of human ships targeted single Velethari vessels and tore them apart with concentrated fire before moving to the next target. Korax shouted orders. His fleet tried to respond, but the humans moved too fast. They changed tactics every few minutes. Just when the Velethari adapted to one approach, the humans tried something completely different, and then the real nightmare began. A human cruiser was hit. Its engines failed. It began to drift toward a Velethari battleship. Korax expected it to explode or surrender. Instead, the crew aimed their dying ship at the battleship's bridge. They overloaded their reactor. They turned their vessel into a missile. The explosion destroyed both ships. Another human ship was surrounded by 5 Velethari destroyers. It was clearly doomed. But instead of surrendering, the captain broadcast a message that every Velethari ship heard. "See you in hell." The ship self-destructed. The explosion took 3 of the destroyers with it. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human crews fought to the last breath. When their ships were crippled, they did not surrender. They rammed enemy vessels. They ejected their crews in escape pods aimed at Velethari ships, and those crews cut through airlocks and fought hand-to-hand in the corridors. They did things that no sane species would do. Korax watched his fleet die around him. "What are they?" he whispered. "What kind of creatures are these?" His aide was pale. "Sir, we are receiving reports from the boarding parties. The human crews, they do not stop fighting. Even when wounded, even when dying, they fight until their hearts stop beating." A human destroyer, its hull torn open and its crew dead, drifted toward Korax's flagship. Its final act was to launch every missile it had left. The flagship's shields held, barely. In 3 hours, the battle was over. The Velethari had won. They had destroyed 170 human ships, but they had lost 112 of their own. Against a smaller, weaker fleet. Against a species that had never fought a space battle before. It was the worst loss the Velethari had suffered in 500 years. Korax sat alone in his quarters that night. He had dismissed his officers. He needed to think. He needed to understand what had happened. He opened his computer and accessed the Concord's files on humanity. He had read them before. They described humans as adaptable, risk-averse, and preferring negotiation over conflict. They described a species that had joined the Concord peacefully and had never shown any signs of aggression. The files were useless. Korax dug deeper. He found the original human historical archives. The Concord had never bothered to fully translate them. Why would they? Humans were a minor species. Their history did not matter. Korax began to read. He learned about a place called Stalingrad, where humans had fought for months over the ruins of a single city, where soldiers had killed each other in frozen basements with knives and bare hands, where the defenders had chosen death over surrender, and the attackers had paid for every street with rivers of blood. He learned about Thermopylae, where 300 warriors had held a pass against an army of hundreds of thousands. They had known they would die. They had fought anyway. He learned about the Somme, where humans had charged into machine gun fire day after day, where 60,000 had died in a single morning, where the survivors had gotten up the next day and charged again. He learned about weapons called nuclear bombs. Humans had invented them to kill each other. They had used them on their own cities. They had killed hundreds of thousands of their own species in seconds, and then they had built more bombs, bigger bombs, bombs that could destroy entire worlds. Korax read for hours. He read about genocide and holy wars and revolutions that had drowned nations in blood. He read about humans who had eaten their dead companions to survive. He read about soldiers who had thrown themselves on grenades to save their friends. When he finished, his hands were shaking. The files had been wrong. Humanity was not risk-averse. Humanity was not peaceful. Humanity was the most violent, stubborn, and terrifying species in the galaxy. They had simply chosen to hide it. Korax recorded a message to the High Council. His voice was hoarse. "We have made a terrible mistake. These creatures do not fight like civilized beings. They do not surrender. They do not retreat. They do not count the cost. They fight like animals, no worse than animals. They fight like something that has decided that dying is acceptable as long as they take you with them." He paused. "I have studied their history. They are insane. Completely insane. They wage war not to win, but to make their enemies suffer. They have weapons they have never shown us. They have tactics we have never seen. And they are angry. 2 million of them died on New Helsinki, and they will not stop until they have taken 2 million of ours. Or 20 million. Or 200 million. His voice cracked. We should not have laughed at them. We should not have burned their colony. We should have left them alone. Because now they are coming for us. And I do not know how to stop them. On a captured Velithari cruiser, a Sinith merchant mind was being held prisoner. It had been traveling with the fleet to assess the economic value of conquered human worlds. Now it was in a cell, surrounded by human soldiers. One of the soldiers sat down across from it. He was young. He had a scar on his face from the boarding action. He looked tired. I have a question, the soldier said. The Sinith mind pulsed with light. Ask. Your collective destroyed 3 of our worlds 30 years ago. You crashed their economies. 12 million people starved. Children died eating dirt because there was nothing else. The soldier leaned forward. Why? It was a market correction, the Sinith replied. The economic models required it. Nothing personal. Nothing personal. The soldier laughed. It was not a happy sound. Nothing personal. You killed 12 million people because your models told you to, and you thought we would just forget. Other species forget. Other species accept their place. It is the way of the galaxy. The soldier shook his head. We are not other species. We remember everything. Every insult. Every death. Every time you treated us like animals. We wrote it all down. We taught it to our children. We waited. He stood up. We are patient. We are stubborn. And we never, ever forgive. The Sinith mind asked one final question. What do you want? What will make you stop? The soldier was silent for a long moment. We want you to understand something. Something your species has never learned. He looked at the Sinith with eyes that held 200 years of rage. We are not like you. When you hurt our people, we do not calculate the cost of revenge. We do not ask if it is profitable. We do not care if we lose more than we gain. He walked to the door. You killed our children. So we will burn your worlds, crash your economies, and tear down everything you have built. Not because it makes sense, not because it helps us, but because you hurt us, and we want you to hurt too. He left. The Sinith mind floated in its cell, processing what it had learned. Its models had been wrong. Its predictions had been wrong. It had assumed that humans were rational, that they would calculate costs and benefits, that they would eventually see that war was not in their interest. It had not understood. Humans were not rational. Humans were something far more dangerous. Humans were vengeful, and they had 200 years of vengeance to deliver. 6 months had passed since the declaration of war. The galaxy had changed beyond recognition. The Sinith collective made the first move against humanity's economy. They froze every human account in the galactic banking system. They cut off all trade routes. They announced that any species doing business with humans would face severe penalties. They believed this would end the war in weeks. It did not. Humans simply stopped using the galactic economy. They had been preparing for this for decades. They had stockpiles of food and fuel, hidden on 100 worlds. They had factories that could produce weapons from asteroid rock. They had scientists who could turn anything into something useful. Within a month, human fleets were running on recycled fuel. Human soldiers were eating synthetic food that tasted terrible but kept them alive. Human engineers were building new ships from the wreckage of old ones. The Sinith watched in disbelief. Their economic warfare had broken empires. It had starved civilizations into submission. It had always worked before. They should be dying, a Sinith analyst reported to the collective. They should be desperate. Instead, they are growing stronger. They do not need us. They never needed us. This was a terrifying thought. The Sinith had built their power on being necessary. If species could survive without them, what was the point of the collective? The answer came 3 weeks later, when human guerrilla fleets appeared in Sinith space. They did not attack military targets. They attacked trade convoys. They destroyed cargo ships. They captured merchant vessels and released the crews with a simple message. Tell your masters that the market has corrected. The Sinith economy began to collapse. Trade routes that had been safe for millennia became hunting grounds. Insurance costs exploded. Species that had depended on Sinith goods began to look for alternatives. And then the defections started. A single Synth hive node contacted the human government. It controlled a mining system that had been stripped of resources and abandoned by the collective. It offered information in exchange for protection. The humans agreed. Within weeks, more nodes defected. They brought maps of Synth trade routes. They brought codes for Synth communications. They brought the locations of Synth strategic reserves. The collective was tearing itself apart. The Orevan Mandate watched this chaos with cold calculation. They were the enforcers of galactic law. They had stayed neutral in the early weeks of the war, hoping it would resolve itself. Now they saw that neutrality was no longer possible. High Arbiter Keth Voran made the decision. The Orevion would enter the war. They would crush humanity with their superior technology and restore order to the galaxy. The Orevion fleet was smaller than the Velathari fleet, but far more advanced. Their ships were controlled by artificial intelligences that could calculate 1,000 variables in a second. Their weapons could strike targets from distances that other species could barely imagine. They had never lost a war. They lost their first battle against humans in 4 hours. It was not a matter of firepower. The Orevan ships were stronger. It was not a matter of numbers. The Orevan had more vessels. It was a matter of speed. Human military doctrine changed faster than the Orevion could adapt. In the first hour, humans used a classic flanking maneuver. The Orevion AIs analyzed it and developed a counter. In the second hour, humans abandoned flanking and used hit-and-run attacks. The Orevan adapted again. In the third hour, humans did something completely new. They launched missiles, then used their own ships as shields for the missiles, taking damage to ensure the weapons reached their targets. The Orevan AIs could not process this. It was tactically absurd. It was strategically wasteful. No rational species would sacrifice ships to protect missiles. But humans were not rational. Humans were creative. Humans looked at the rules of warfare and asked, what if we just ignored those? By the fourth hour, the Orevion command network had been hacked. Human cyber warfare specialists had found vulnerabilities that no one had known existed. Orevion ships began firing on each other. Their perfect formation dissolved into chaos. The surviving Orevan retreated. They had lost 60% of their fleet. An Orevion analyst named Vis was assigned to understand what had gone wrong. She spent weeks studying human military history, human psychology, human society. She submitted her report to High Arbiter Keth Voran personally. Human military doctrine adapts in days, she wrote. Ours requires decades of committee review. Their commanders are given freedom to make decisions in the moment. Ours must wait for authorization. Their soldiers are trained to think for themselves. Ours are trained to follow orders. She paused in her presentation. Her pale face showed something rare for an Orevan: emotion. They treat impossible as a starting point. They look at a problem and ask, not can this be solved, but how can this be solved? And then they try everything until something works. They fail constantly. They do not care. They just try again. Keth Voran studied the report in silence. Can we defeat them? He asked. Vis hesitated. Perhaps. With time. With resources. With new tactics. She looked at the High Arbiter with hollow eyes. But by the time we adapt to what they are doing now, they will be doing something else. They evolve faster than we can respond. It is like fighting water. Every time you push, it flows around you. Then what do you recommend? Peace. Immediate peace. Accept whatever terms they offer. Because the longer this war continues, the stronger they become, and the weaker we become. Keth Voran dismissed her. He did not want to hear about peace. The Orevan had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. They would not bow to a species that had been traveling between stars for only 2 centuries. But Vis's report spread. Other Orevan read it. They began to question, and questions, in the Orevan Mandate, were the beginning of the end. Across the galaxy, the war continued to spread. The Velathari had retreated to their core systems. They had lost half their fleet. They had lost a dozen worlds to human occupation. Their civilians were beginning to protest. Why were they dying for a war they had started by destroying one colony? Lord Commander Vask, who had laughed at the human declaration of war, was executed by his own government. They needed someone to blame. He was convenient. The Synth collective was fragmenting. Individual hive nodes were declaring independence. Some were joining the humans. Others were simply running, trying to escape before the humans found them. The Arivon mandate was paralyzed by internal debate. Some wanted to continue the war. Others wanted to surrender. The committees met endlessly and decided nothing. And in the spaces between the great powers, something else was happening. Minor species began to rise up. For 10,000 years, the Galactic Concord had kept order through fear. Minor species obeyed because they had no choice. They had seen what happened to those who resisted. The elder races were too powerful. Rebellion was suicide. But now the elder races were bleeding. Now they were weak. Now there was hope. On a dozen worlds, oppressed species watched the human war broadcasts. They saw Velithari ships burning. They saw Sinith trade routes collapsing. They saw Orivian fleets retreating. They saw that the mighty could fall. The first uprising was on a world called Thessa. It had been a Velithari slave colony for 300 years. The Thessans had served their masters without complaint, because complaint meant death. When news arrived that the Velithari Third Fleet had been destroyed by humans, the Thessans stopped working. They refused to harvest crops. They refused to mine ore. They simply sat down and waited. The Velithari garrison tried to force them back to work. The Thessans did not fight back. They just died. Thousands of them. They died in the fields and the mines and the streets. They died with smiles on their faces because they knew that somewhere in the galaxy, the Velithari were dying too. Other uprisings followed. Some were peaceful, some were violent. All were inspired by the same thing. Humanity had shown that the elder races could be beaten. High Arbiter Kethvoran watched his galaxy crumble. He had ruled it for 40 years. He had believed it would last forever. Now he saw the truth. The Concord was dying. He accessed the human historical archives, the same archives that Admiral Corax had found. He read about human wars and human atrocities and human cruelty. Then he found something else. He found records of something humans called the Geneva Conventions. They were rules. Rules that humans had created to limit their own behavior in war. Rules that said prisoners should be treated humanely. Rules that said civilians should not be targeted. Rules that said there were some things you should not do, even to your enemies. Kethvoran read these rules carefully. He realized something that made his blood run cold. Humans had created these rules because they knew what they were capable of. They had seen themselves at their worst. They had committed acts so terrible that they had felt the need to write laws preventing themselves from doing it again. The rules existed because humans were trying to hold themselves back. And in this war, humans were following those rules. They were not targeting Velithari civilians. They were not destroying Orivan cities. They were not committing the atrocities that their history showed they were capable of. They were fighting at half strength, maybe less. Kethvoran put down his datapad. His hands were shaking. The humans had won this war months ago. They were just waiting for the elder races to admit it. And if the elder races did not admit it soon, the humans might stop holding back. For the first time in his long life, High Arbiter Kethvoran understood what it meant to be a minor species. It meant knowing that someone else controlled whether you lived or died, and hoping they would choose to be merciful. 1 year after the war began, Ambassador Ilara Vance returned to Nexus Prime. The Great Hall looked different now. Many seats were empty. Some species had been destroyed in the fighting. Others had fled to the edges of the galaxy. Others had simply stopped coming, too ashamed or too afraid to face what the conquered had become. The elder races sat in their traditional places, but they did not look like rulers anymore. The Velithari delegation was small and quiet. Lord Commander Vask's replacement sat with his head bowed. The Sinith Collective sent only a single sphere, representing the few hive nodes that had not defected. The Arivanan mandate attended in force, but High Arbiter Kethvoran looked like he had aged 20 years in 12 months. Ambassador Vance walked to the center of the chamber. She moved slowly. The war had cost her much. Her hair was fully gray now. Her face was lined with exhaustion, but her eyes were still sharp. Her back was still straight. She was not alone. Secretary General Marcus Chen walked beside her. Behind them came a delegation of human officers, diplomats, and advisors. They wore simple uniforms. They carried no weapons. They did not need to. Everyone knew who had won. 1 year ago, Vance began. I stood in this chamber and asked for justice. You laughed at me. You told me that 2 million human lives were worth 400,000 credits. You told me to accept my place. She looked around the hall. No one was laughing now. Today, I am not asking for anything. Today, I am here to tell you how things will be. Secretary General Chen stepped forward. His voice carried across the silent chamber. The Galactic Concord is dissolved. As of this moment, it no longer exists. The treaties that bound species to the elder races are void. The laws that gave the elder races power over others are void. Everything you built on the suffering of weaker species is void. A murmur ran through the hall. Species that had been silent for centuries whispered to each other. Some wept, some smiled. For the first time in 10,000 years, they were free. In place of the Concord, Chen continued, we will establish a new galactic assembly. Every species will have an equal voice. Every species will have one vote. There will be no elder races. There will be no minor species. There will only be members. High Arbiter Keth Voran rose from his seat. His voice was hoarse. And what of us? The species you call elder races? What is our place in this new order? Chen's expression did not change. Your military forces will be placed under assembly oversight. You will not be permitted to build new warships without approval. You will not be permitted to expand your territory without approval. You will be watched. You will be monitored. You will be held accountable. This is humiliation, Keth Voran said. You would reduce us to servants. Ambassador Vance stepped forward. Her voice was ice. You reduced us to corpses. You burned our children alive. You shot down our escape ships. You laughed while our cities turned to glass. She took another step toward the High Arbiter. You are getting off easy. The hall was silent. There is one more condition, Chen said. War crimes tribunals will be established. Those responsible for New Helsinki will be tried. Those responsible for the Sinith economic attacks will be tried. Those responsible for the countless smaller crimes against humanity over the past 2 centuries will be tried. Justice will be done. The Velathari delegate spoke for the first time. And if we refuse these terms? Chen looked at him. The old man's eyes held no warmth. Then we will continue the war. We will burn your homeworlds. We will destroy your fleets. We will hunt your leaders across the galaxy. And when we are done, there will be no Velathari left to refuse anything. He paused. We do not want this. We have never wanted this. You forced this war upon us. We are offering you a way out. Take it, because if you do not, we will show you what we look like when we stop holding back. The Velathari delegate sat down. He did not speak again. The terms were accepted. There was no negotiation. There was no discussion. The elder races signed the documents and surrendered their power. The war was over. In the months that followed, the galaxy braced itself for human vengeance. They had seen what humans could do in war. They expected occupation, punishment, and cruelty. They expected to be treated the way the elder races had treated others for 10,000 years. They were wrong. Human ships arrived at devastated worlds, but they brought food and medicine instead of weapons. Human engineers helped rebuild cities that had been destroyed in the fighting. Human teachers opened schools on planets where education had been forbidden. On Velathari worlds, humans established hospitals that treated anyone who needed help, regardless of species. On former Sinith trade hubs, humans created fair markets where small species could sell their goods without being exploited. On Aurivian planets, humans introduced the concept of public trials where justice was visible and open. The galaxy watched in confusion. This was not how conquerors behaved. This was not how power was used. A Velathari historian named Morax devoted himself to understanding humanity. He traveled to human worlds. He lived among them. He studied their culture and their history. He tried to answer the question that haunted his species. Why had the humans shown mercy? He found his answer on Earth, in a small museum dedicated to human wars. The museum was full of terrible things. Weapons that had killed millions. Photographs of destruction. Records of atrocities committed by humans against humans. At the end of the museum was a simple display. It showed images of humans rebuilding after wars, enemies becoming friends, children playing in cities that had once been battlefields. A sign above the display read, "We fight because we must. We forgive because we choose." Morax finally understood. Humans were not merciful because they were weak. Humans were merciful because they had seen the alternative. They had lived through the worst things beings could do to each other. They had learned that hatred, if left to grow, would consume everything. They had chosen, deliberately and consciously, to break the cycle. This was their greatest strength. Not their fury, not their endurance, not their terrifying capacity for destruction. Their greatest strength was that after all they had suffered, after all they had done, they still chose to be kind. 5 years after the war, a young Velithari girl was adopted by a human family. Her parents had died in the conflict. She had been found in the ruins of a Velithari city, alone and starving. The family that adopted her lived on New Helsinki, not the original colony that was gone forever. A new city, built on a new world, carrying the old name to honor those who had died. A reporter asked the human mother why she would raise the child of her enemy. The question was honest. The woman's own brother had died on the original New Helsinki. The mother looked at the child. The girl was playing in the garden, chasing butterflies under an alien sun. She was laughing. She did not start the war, the mother said. And someone has to end the cycle. Someone has to look at a child and see a child, not an enemy. Someone has to choose love over hatred. She smiled. It was a tired smile, but a real one. If we cannot do that, then what was the point of winning? Across the galaxy, species began to tell stories about humans, not the old stories, about their violence and their stubbornness and their capacity for destruction. New stories. They told stories about human doctors who worked through the night to save alien patients. They told stories about human soldiers who shared their food with starving enemies. They told stories about human teachers who learned alien languages so they could help children understand. They told stories about a species that had been pushed too far, that had fought back with terrifying power, and that had then put down its weapons and extended its hand. An old Velithari veteran was interviewed for a historical archive. He had fought against humans in the war. He had lost friends and family. He had every reason to hate them. The interviewer asked him what he had learned about humans. The old warrior was silent for a long time. His scales had faded with age. His eyes were cloudy. But when he spoke, his voice was clear. They are not conquerors. They are gardeners. They wanted to grow alongside us. They wanted to build something beautiful together. We chose to burn their garden. He looked at the recorder with ancient, haunted eyes. Never burn a human's garden, because they will tear down your entire world to plant a single flower on your grave. He paused. And then, they will water it until something beautiful grows. The interview ended. The veteran leaned back and closed his eyes. Somewhere, far away, a human woman and a Velithari girl were planting flowers together in a garden on New Helsinki. The cycle had broken. The galaxy had learned, and humanity, finally, had found its place among the stars, not as rulers, not as conquerors, not as the masters of lesser beings, as teachers, as healers, as the species that had looked into the darkest parts of itself and chosen, despite everything, to reach for the light. The war was over, the healing had begun, and for the first time in 10,000 years, the galaxy had hope.